From a gambling game that came with little horses cast out in lead, to a doll you were meant to pull the hair out of through a hole in her skull, British toy shops in the 1970s were selling things that would get a company shut down today. And the strange part is nobody thought any of it was odd at the time. Your mum bought these, your nan wrapped them, you opened them on Christmas morning and you were thrilled. These are 10 toys that every British child wanted and that not one of them should probably have been allowed to have. Number 10. Escalado. If you have never seen one, picture a long strip of green cloth stretched across the dining table with a hand crank clamped to one end. You wound the crank, the track shuddered, and a row of little horses judded towards the finish line while everybody screamed. It was invented by a Swiss man called Arthur Guidon and patented in 1928, and Chad Valley in Birmingham made it for decades after. By the 70s, it had already been under British Christmas trees for 2 generations. So what makes it weird? 2 things. The first is that it is a betting game, not a game with betting bolted on. The whole point of Escalado is that everyone puts money on a horse and the winner takes the pot. Children were being taught to run a book before they could ride a bike. The second is what those horses were made of. The early sets came with 5 horses cast in lead. Later versions used non-poisonous metals or plastic, which tells you exactly what the earlier ones were. But Escalado is the tame one. It gets much stranger from here. Number 9. Tressy. Palitoy made her in Leicestershire, and she was on every little girl's list. The selling point was that her hair grew. You turned a key in her stomach and a length of hair fed out through a hole in the top of her head. Turn it the other way and it went back in. Read that again. There was a hole in her skull, a mechanism in her abdomen, and the toy invited you to operate it. Children loved her, and every one of them eventually did the same thing. They pulled the hair all the way out to see how long it went, at which point Tressy was bald forever. There is something dark about a doll built around a feature a child is guaranteed to destroy. But she was a British institution, and half the country over 50 still remembers that key turning. However, if you want a toy that got the face wrong, we need to talk about the Doctor. Number 8. The Dennis Fisher Doctor Who doll from 1976. Doctor Who was the biggest thing on British television. Tom Baker was the Doctor with the curls and the teeth and that scarf. So when Dennis Fisher of Leeds got the licence, every child in the country wanted one under the tree. What they got was a doll with a square jaw and a neat little smile, a face that belonged to a handsome stranger rather than to Tom Baker. The scarf was wrong too. Instead of the famous multicoloured monster, it came in purple and grey stripes. Fans spent years passing around a story that the heads were left over from a Gareth Hunt doll made for the new Avengers. It is a great story, and it has since been debunked. The real story is simpler and sadder. Somebody worked from poor reference and nobody at the factory stopped the line. A toy of the most recognisable man on British television, and they did not manage to make it look like him. That is the 70s in one plastic box. Number 7. Eagle Eyes Action Man. Action Man was already king of the British toy box. Palitoy had given him gripping hands and that flocked hair that felt like a tennis ball. Then, in the mid-70s, came the feature the adverts went mad for. There was a small lever in the back of his head. You pushed it, and his eyes swiveled from side to side. Think about what that actually is. A soldier with a control in the base of his skull that a child operates to move his eyeballs. In 1976, it was the most exciting thing that had ever happened. Now it reads like something out of a horror film. And it worked. Eagle Eyes shifted in enormous numbers and kept Action Man on top of the British market for years. Every boy in the country spent Christmas morning making a soldier look shiftily left and right. But at least Action Man could not hurt you. The next one absolutely could. Number 6. Ideal launched it in 1973 and it landed in Britain like a bomb. The setup was a hand-cranked gyro launcher. You wound the handle until the flywheel was screaming, then let go, and a small plastic motorbike with a small plastic man on it fired across the living room carpet at alarming speed. Children built ramps out of encyclopedias, jumped it over the cat, jumped it over each other's legs. It hit skirting boards hard enough to take chunks out of the paint. And remember who it was modelled on. Evel Knievel was famous above all for crashing. He was famous for the ambulance. British children were given a launcher, a plastic daredevil, and the clear instruction to see what he could survive. Nobody thought that was a strange message to send. It sold in the millions. Number 5. The Thingmaker, better known here as the machine that made creepy crawlers. Here is how it worked. You got a metal mold shaped like a spider or a worm. You squeezed a bottle of coloured goo called Plastigoop into it. Then you put the tray onto an open electric hot plate, plugged it into the wall and waited for it to bake. An open heating element on a table, operated by a 7-year-old. The instructions told you to use the little wire tool to lift the tray out. Children being children, they used their fingers, and burns were routine. Ask anyone who owned one and they will show you the mark. The maddest part is that it was brilliant. You genuinely made your own toys out of goo at home, and they came out warm and rubbery and smelled incredible. Every child who had one remembers it as the best thing they ever owned. That is the 70s problem in a sentence. The best toys were the ones that could hurt you. Number 4. The Space Hopper. Nothing about this toy is normal, and Britain has simply agreed not to discuss it. It arrived at the end of the 60s, and by the 70s it was everywhere. A large orange rubber ball, 2 horns to hold, and a face. And what a face! A wide, grinning mouth, heavy eyebrows, an expression that sits somewhere between delighted and deranged. British children were told to sit on its head and bounce down the garden path. There was no way to steer. You bounced until you hit a curb, then came off sideways onto concrete. Every child in Britain has a space hopper scar on an elbow somewhere. It is also one of the few toys here that survived. You can still buy one, which means somewhere in a boardroom, an adult is still signing off production runs of the grinning orange face. And good. Now for the one that arrived in almost every British household. Number 3. The Raleigh Chopper. This is the big one. Britain's bike. It came out in 1970, built in Nottingham, and it did not look like a bicycle at all. 16-inch front wheel, 20-inch rear, high-rise handlebars, a long padded seat, and a gear lever sticking out of the frame like something off a car. Raleigh saw cycle sales jump by 55% in 1971 because of it. By 1976, they had sold 750,000 and released a special edition to celebrate. But look at that design again. The gear lever sits on the crossbar at exactly the height a child lands when they come off the seat. The handlebars were so high, the British Medical Journal ran a report saying the steering was unsafe. There were warnings about 2 children riding it together, which of course every child did, because the seat was clearly built for 2. Raleigh redesigned it in 1972 with a shorter seat and altered bars. A witch test eventually said it was safe enough if ridden sensibly, which is a wonderful thing to say about a bike sold to 9-year-olds. Children who tested it found it slow and hard work uphill and preferred an ordinary racer. They wanted it anyway. It looked like a motorbike, and that was worth every inch of the hill. Number 2. The chemistry set. Salter Science and Merit sold these by the crate to British families, and parents bought them because they looked educational. A wooden case, a rack of little glass bottles, a spirit burner, a booklet of experiments. Inside those bottles were things no child would be allowed within a mile of now. Potassium nitrate, sulfur, compounds that were toxic, corrosive, or both. And the booklet did not merely tolerate what happened next, it taught it. The experiment lists included instructions that added up to making explosives, and every boy in Britain with a set worked that out within a fortnight. The sets came home from the shop, went out to the shed, and were used to blow craters in the flower beds. Parents heard the bang, shouted out of the back door, and got on with the washing up. Nobody thought this was unusual. That is what a British childhood looked like. And it is why the man who fixes your boiler can still tell you what saltpeter smells like. Number 1. Clackers. 2 hard spheres, one on each end of a string with a ring in the middle. You held the ring and jerked your hand so the balls swung apart and smashed together, above and below, faster and faster, making a noise like gunfire. Every playground in Britain sounded like a firing range. Teachers could hear 100 children playing with them from inside the staff room. Then they started to break. The 1968 version used tempered glass spheres. Later ones were plastic, around 2 inches across, and the plastic did not hold up either. Swung hard enough and often enough, the balls chipped, cracked, and shattered, sending fragments out at the exact height of a child's face, because the child's hands were between them. The New York Times was reporting on the injuries by February 1971. They were pulled from sale in the United States and Canada in the early 1970s, and an American court later classed them as a mechanical hazard. In Britain, there was no dramatic ban. They simply got confiscated, one playground at a time, until they were gone. Ask anyone who was at a British school in 1971, and they will do the hand motion before they finish the sentence. That is what a proper toy does. It gets into your muscles, and it stays there for 50 years. Look at that list again. A betting game with lead horses, a doll with a hole in her head, an open hot plate, and a set of chemicals that taught children to make explosives. Not one of those was a mistake. Every one of them was designed, approved, advertised on television, and bought in enormous numbers by ordinary British parents who loved their children very much. We were not tougher back then. We were just given more rope, and most of us were fine. And the ones who were not have a scar and a good story. So tell me in the comments which of these was in your house and whether you still have the mark to prove it. And if you want more of this, there is a video on your screen now about the Britain we grew up in and the bits of it that quietly disappeared. In lead. Later